Hi everyone, thank you for coming to my channel. I am excited to take a look at Brendan Banfield's chart with you guys today. This is a case that is happening right now, and Brendan Banfield was an IRS undercover officer who admitted to having had an affair with his au pair. Then they catfished a guy on a sexual fetish website to break into his home, have non-consensual sex with his wife, at which point he and the au pair allegedly made a plan to shoot the guy and murder his wife. So, from what I read, the motive was so he could be with the au pair, he could get full custody of their daughter that he had with the wife. And I think, as per usual, there would be some financial gain to it as well. So obviously, what I just described, the details of the case, how they went about it is super out there, super bizarre. Of course, this case has been getting a ton of buzz, and I was able to obtain some information about Brendan Banfield through publicly available sources. So I have his date of birth as February 23rd, 1985. And then, based on public information, he may have been born in Manorville, New York, although this has not been independently verified. So, what I'm going to do is take you guys through the aspects, not the houses, since we don't know the time of birth. And other than the moon, which changes degrees every 2 hours, the planets on this date are pretty set in stone. So, we can definitely go ahead and interpret what aspects the planets are making to each other. I also want to say that what I plan to talk about in this video is my opinion. I am not stating facts. I have no opinion of whether this guy did or did not commit this crime, but I'm going to interpret what I am seeing here, how these aspects may have caused certain behaviors, certain patterns for Brendan Banfield. He's also apparently taking the stand tomorrow, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit too and predict how I think he may act when he's up there, what he might say based on what I'm seeing here. And if you guys have been following this trial as well, definitely let me know what you think. So the most obvious thing that struck me when I looked at this chart that may have struck you is that he definitely has Mars conjunct Venus in Aries. And with this time, he does have the moon at 18 Virgo. That could change depending on the time he was born. Um, but his moon was definitely in Aries no matter what time he was born on this day. So if he was born around a couple of degrees before 15 Aries or after 16 Aries, this moon would be making some kind of a stellium to the Venus-Mars conjunction in Aries. So let's just talk about Mars conjunct Venus in Aries first. So Mars conjunct Venus, we've seen this in some of the other charts I've done. So Venus is the planet that symbolizes what you want, what you desire, and then Mars is your action planet. It shows how you take action. And being that these planets are both in Aries, we can surmise that Brendan is someone who's very quick to get at what he wants and to go after what he wants. It also could indicate that he can be quite physical and in the moment. So the sign of Aries, think of it as like lighting a match. Once you light the match, it just goes and it burns really quickly. So this is someone who's passionate, he's assertive, he probably really likes immediate gratification, especially since Mars here is in its rulership. And this is someone who may be attracted to the chase. I could definitely see someone like this cheating or having an affair, which he admitted to. And if this energy is not used in a certain way, this person could kind of walk around becoming magnetized by others, going after them, not really thinking about the consequences. Um, in fact, I just talked about Ted Bundy, that he had a lot of fire, very little earth. And he was someone who was incredibly stimulated, energized, kind of just did things without thinking about the consequences. Now, another thing I'm going to look at here is planetary order. So right now, because the Mars is at 18 degrees of Aries, Mars is setting the tone of this dynamic because it comes first at 15 degrees. So that would tell us that Brendan may act before he actually feels something, which may sound a little weird to some people. So, in other words, he may make decisions spur of the moment and then question himself later, feel unsure why he did something. Mars also deals with sex drive. So if he was a horny dude, it's a bit like his sex drive leads the way, he makes a move, and then feelings of romance or love could follow. Now, if his moon was leading the pack, so let's say his moon was in front of the um, the Mars and Venus, let's say it was at 14 degrees Aries or 13 degrees of Aries, for instance, it would start with a feeling. And his feelings are going to feel quite intense since it's fire energy. So he may feel quite hurt or angry. And in response to dealing with those feelings, he's going to jump into action quite quickly since it would be making a stellium with Mars, and Mars is already in Aries. It's already in its rulership. So this is someone, again, we could surmise that really acts quickly, acts with a lot of passion or enthusiasm. If I were sitting down with Brendan Banfield, I would be very curious about what was going on in his relationship with his wife. So, did he feel as though she was causing feelings of hurt or anger in him? Was she not really paying attention to him anymore? So, he had to direct this energy towards getting his needs met elsewhere, for instance. Also, I just want to preface that if you have your Mars and Venus in Aries and if they are conjunct, this does not necessarily mean that you'll be unfaithful, but in general, it may be important for you to feel excitement in your relationships, to feel a spark, more so perhaps than some of the other signs. So again, if this moon came first in the stellium, Brandon may also fight when he feels hurt. Mars in Aries is like a warrior, so this does not strike me as someone who cowers in the corner like a puppy dog. He does have the potential to lash out if he feels upset, and he also may have trouble separating his feelings from his actions. Now, what is also heavily impacting this is that these planets are making a trine to Uranus at 17 degrees of Sagittarius. And I have to be honest, when I first sat down and looked at this chart, I was a little surprised that I didn't see more squares and oppositions. But I have to remind myself, as I remind all of you, that when you have a trine in your natal chart, it doesn't always mean it's a good thing. It just means something can come easy. So we could surmise from this information that this is someone who can easily act in ways that are unpredictable or out of the ordinary. And because Uranus is about sudden and unexpected change, this is someone who could really want to experiment with ideas. So the fact that he has Venus conjunct Mars, in particular, trying this Uranus, could mean he's more likely to say something like, hey, I have this crazy idea. I know it's really weird, but just hear me out. And again, particularly because all of this is in fire, he's going to be quite energetic, enthusiastic about his plans, about his ideas, and he's really kind of going to go full speed ahead. So we have this bundle of energy in Aries making the trine to Uranus, and then Uranus is in Sagittarius. So this is owned by the planet of Jupiter, because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So whenever you're reading a natal chart, you can't just stop at a planet and deduce its entire meaning from that. You need to look at where the planet is that rules the astrological sign that it's in to get more information to make the most meaning out of it. Now, funny enough, Jupiter here is in Aquarius, which is in mutual reception um, to Uranus and Sag. And that's because Uranus co-rules um, um, Aquarius. Sorry, I got stuck on something. So What this tells us is that these two planets are aligning together to create some kind of change. So Jupiter just expands whatever it touches. And then Uranus, like I said before, it's about electricity, doing something unexpected, disrupting order, trying something new on. So we could surmise that this is someone who not only has weird ideas, he feels destined to really try them out in a big, big way. He may even justify his extreme actions and say something to the effect of, I'm the only one who sees what's happening. I'm the only one who sees what's really going on. I need to shake things up a bit. This is someone I think who may feel like they're invincible and kind of limitless. So again, not necessarily thinking about the future or potential consequences. Now, interestingly, Jupiter is making a square to his Pluto. And I think this is the only square that we see between his planets, but this is a pretty powerful one. So just like Mars is in its rulership because Mars rules Aries, Pluto is in its home sign of Scorpio. So this is like super Scorpio to me. So Jupiter square Pluto, it's like big power times big ambition. But the square makes it a hard aspect. So when you have a square between two planets, they're at a crossroads. There can be some struggle, some butting of heads, some friction. So it's not aligning smoothly. So in Brendan's case, this square may represent a misuse of power or challenging authority. This is someone who I see is going to have problems with authority because some other stuff I'm going to talk about as well. Um, so again, makes sense why he became an armed FBI officer, right? Then he's the authority, so to speak. So but back to the square. So this aspect may tell us that this is not necessarily, again, a person who carefully thinks things through before they make decisions. This could be a very in the moment type of a person who has pretty lofty expectations. This is just a question I have, but I wonder if Pluto represented his wife. Because when we have a square, we can kind of project the energy of one of the planets onto someone else. So my question would be um, whether he had big ideas, especially with this Jupiter in Aquarius, maybe even ideas that were radical or unrealistic or really a stretch for her to imagine. And then I would ask him if his wife challenged him on those beliefs or she pushed back. It could have created feelings of loss of control for Brendan. They could have had many arguments behind the scenes. Like I said in the beginning, I know he's going to testify in court tomorrow. So I'm very curious to hear how he paints a picture of his wife, because based on this, he could really have thought she was the bad guy. Like he was the reasonable husband doing everything that was in the best interest for their daughter, for them, but she became, in his eyes, too domineering, maybe took things away from him. So we see this square play out. And then if this theory is correct, Brendan would not necessarily just adjust and say, okay, happy wife, happy life. He could really escalate things with this square and take bigger risks towards getting what he wanted or what he felt he deserved. Yet once reality smacks him in the face, he could also be left feeling like, I didn't know it would go this far. So I don't know if he's admitting to having even reached out to the guy on the website, but if he does cop to that and say, yeah, I admit I went along with the au pair and we catfished this guy, I could see him saying something like, oh, it got way out of hand. We didn't mean for it to go that far, so on and so forth. I don't know if he's going to say that or not. I'm just saying, um, with this square, things can get really out of hand. The person, again, if they become Jupiter and then Pluto kind of, rears its head and is like, well, now you're in danger, you've gone too far, they could easily kind of justify it and say, I didn't know it was going to go that far. And again, I just want to make clear that this is a theory or a question I have based on what I'm seeing in his chart. I'm not stating facts, and we ultimately don't know what happened in this case. Now, taking this a step further, Pluto is making a trine to his Sun and his Mercury, and they are both in Pisces. And they're conjunct. So I want to just address Sun conjunct Mercury in Pisces first. So another thing I'm really wondering about when he testifies is whether he's going to come across as like this real storyteller. So he could meander, he may go off track at times. I expect that he may have to be redirected by his attorney or stopped quite a bit unless he's rehearsed his story a bunch, which is quite possible. And I imagine that what he's going to do when he gets up there is that he's going to kind of weave this vibrant story for us, but I'm not sure that he's going to come across as very logical and things may sound vague, especially because Mercury is in Pisces. So this could come across as evasive or unclear. So Sun conjunct Mercury in Pisces could also be someone who, in my mind, could be very good at rewriting a narrative or a story that aligns with how they want others to see them. So this is what really tells me it's no surprise that he's testifying. Most defendants or many defendants don't choose to testify because it's so risky. But I think that with this aspect in particular, he really feels the need to tell a story that the world has never heard before. And that's somehow going to, defend his character. So Sun, Mercury trine Pluto. So I will say this could mean that he has the depth and the focus to really plan things. Initially, when I saw all the Aries, Moon, Mars, Venus, trine, Jupiter and Sag, or trine Uranus and Sag, I was thinking to myself, oh, this guy is just a loose cannon. But this trine right here speaks to his ability to really focus and really hone in on a long-term goal to achieve some type of perceived power. And this could be someone who really doesn't even realize how much power they have. They also may not question their own power. They feel as though they are in power. They are the authority because it's Sun trine Pluto. And so Sun is all about identity, ego, and with it making this easy aspect to Pluto, he feels as though he naturally should have power and authority. This also does give him some psychological depth, and I can see why he worked as an IRS investigator, especially with this trine to Pluto in Scorpio. This is someone who wants to go behind the scenes, find out all the secrets. Plus, he's armed, so he has that fire energy to go along with the I'm in charge vibe. I find it really interesting how people can use their chart often in very unconscious ways because most people don't know their natal chart, but they wind up using their chart just brilliantly in terms of choosing a career. And I have to say, I think he picked a really good one for himself here. Now, Saturn could be helping him to be a bit more grounded and practical, but it's really not doing a lot in this chart. So one very important thing I think it is doing is that it's making an opposition to Chiron. Again, I think this is his only opposition in the chart. If this birth time were correct, Neptune would be making an opposition to his ascendant, which is really interesting, but I'm not going to touch on that because we just don't know. So I think I talked about Chiron in Gemini in the Melody Buzzard case. So This tells us, Chiron and Gemini, that this is someone who could have some real wounds around not being heard, um, not being able to communicate or use their voice in some way. So again, I would wonder if I was sitting down and meeting with him, where is he in his birth order? Does he have siblings? Is he the oldest? Um, or is he a twin? Um, but anyway, so yeah, this indicates he has some real wounds about not being heard. Um, and with this opposition to Saturn, he could tend to feel like authority figures just keep bashing his head in. They just keep literally making him feel criticized and shamed. This may be another reason why he feels the need to take the stand, especially being that he has wounds around not being heard. So he may be thinking something like, I can't let them win, or I have to speak up here. I have to prove myself. So similar to the cases I've done, we've seen some pretty powerful karmic stuff with the nodes. And in this case, he came into this life with Saturn making a conjunction to his south node. So to me, what this means is, first of all, he knows Scorpio extremely well because this is his south node is in Scorpio. And what he knows very well, then is going to be around secrecy, manipulation, depth, power, searching for the truth. But Saturn making the conjunction here tells us you must handle Scorpio responsibly in this lifetime. There also could be something here about his growth being stunted if he clings too tightly to Scorpio themes. And so, if Brendan Banfield is found guilty, this is yet another person who will have been forced to grow and to find new ways of doing things because he could not get it done on his own, perhaps. Now, his North Node is in Taurus, um, which is going to be a tough one to achieve from prison if he does go to prison, since Taurus is all about security of possessions and belongings, but it's also about self-worth and self-value. So that may be something that he is forced to work on if he does get convicted. So that is my um, interpretation of Brendan Banfield's natal chart. Let me know what you guys think. Again, those of you watching the trial, let me know what you think about my predictions. What do you think he's going to say on the stand? Let me know if I'm missing anything. If you're into true crime and you're into astrology, please hit subscribe. I'll catch you in my next video, and thank you so much for watching.